Everyone, and welcome back to more political chatter. In this video, we will be talking about the Chicago mayoral election that will be held tomorrow and my final prediction for the race. So, if you didn't know, a few weeks ago, the first round of voting was held where there were so many candidates, and the incumbent mayor of Chicago, Lori Lightfoot, did not make it into the runoff. She was not one of the top two candidates, and therefore she will not be a candidate in the runoff. So one thing is for certain, and that Lori Lightfoot, they have retired Lori Lightfoot. She will not be the mayor of Chicago for 4 more years. So the race is between Paul Vallas and Brandon Johnson. Both, I don't even know who they are. They're like activists, and then Brandon Johnson is an alderman. But they were able to get, let's see, what were the percentages? Paul Vallas won, he got the most votes, like kind of by a lot, out of all of these candidates that we see here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, about 8, 9, 10, 9, 10. About 9 or 10 candidates in the field, Paul Vallas was able to get almost a third of the vote. He got 32.9, just about a third. In second place was Brandon Johnson, kind of far behind with like 50,000 less votes. He got 21.6% of the vote. And then came Lori Lightfoot at 17%. Chuy Garcia at 14%, Willie Wilson at 9%, and so on. So, as you can see, Paul Vallas and Brandon Johnson were able to win more votes than the incumbent mayor and a U.S. representative. So, their wins were, to me, kind of shocking. Not really Paul Vallas, just because of polling. I mean, if we're talking 2019, it was a shock that Paul Vallas got into the runoff if we were just, if we did not look at polls at all. Because in 2019, Paul Vallas got 5% of the vote, okay? He got only 5%. And then in 2023, if we didn't have all that polling, I would not expect Paul Vallas to do 27 points better than he did in 2019 because he was a candidate in 2019. But, based off of polling, I did predict that Paul Vallas would get in, and I also predicted that Lori Lightfoot would get in. I did not expect Brandon Johnson to pull out an upset and win. I mean, Brandon Johnson was the underdog in the whole race, and he gained so much popularity in, the final last week or two of the campaign. He picked up so much steam and had the momentum that he did win and got into the runoff. It wasn't quite the third of the vote that Paul Vallas got, but it was 21%, 1 in 5 votes. He got more than 1 in 5 votes. So it's Brandon Johnson versus Paul Vallas. The rest have been eliminated. So looking at, look at polling here and endorsements. We will be looking at everything. So here's the runoff. Paul Vallas has been leading the polls, these final last minute polls. This one was released yesterday, March 31st to April 2nd, administered by Victory Research, finds Paul Vallas at 49.6%, Brandon Johnson at 45.4%, and 5% are undecided. A Hill poll, by Emerson, they just sponsored it. But Emerson, which is, a pretty trusted poll, they have an A- rating. This one was done a few days ago. It also shows Paul Vallas in the lead, 46 to 40, 13% undecided. This one was a little while ago, so we are, getting more into the some time ago category. They were tied. So these will probably be the last polls unless some are released today. But these are showing Paul Vallas with a lead. Okay, the margin of error is about 3%. Of course, that's not always right. Sometimes it is more. And upsets have shown us that. But it's looking like a Paul Vallas win based off polling. With these, 5% undecided, it's not like all 5% or all 13% are going to go to Brandon Johnson. But looking at this race with all of that momentum that Brandon Johnson was able to build up, I'm not sure how much more he could, because, to keep going with his momentum, he would still have to build up a lot more support. And this is not a guy that can expand to a bunch of bases, because, he is a progressive, he is a liberal, he is a Democrat, even though technically all these guys are independents. Once he reaches, that top amount of vote that he could get, that Willie Wilson vote, that Lori Lightfoot vote, that Jamal Green vote, once he reaches that, I don't know how much further he could go. I think he has kind of reached his maximum, to be honest. While Paul Vallas, I think he can still expand on where he is. I think that Paul Vallas, he is such an interesting candidate, especially in this time where, of course, everyone in Chicago is liberal, but they do not have a good taste in their mouth from Lori Lightfoot, who is so unpopular and, a notoriously, and yes, I will use that word in this case, a notoriously liberal mayor. And I don't know how I think that will benefit Paul Vallas, because he is running his campaign as a moderate, and he could stretch his vote to more groups of people, like progressives, like liberals, but also, the Republicans, the conservatives in Chicago, the independents in Chicago, the more moderate Democrats in Chicago, everyone who is upset with Lori Lightfoot. And I think that Brandon Johnson is going to be, just because of his policy stances, I think that he might be a little more aligned with Lori Lightfoot than Paul Vallas is. So, I think that Paul Vallas is better positioned to win this race, and I do believe that he will become the next mayor of Chicago. They are both making their final pushes before Election Day. Both have been running excellent campaigns. I give Brandon Johnson so much credit, because no one, he was such an underdog candidate, and honestly, it would honestly be cool to see him win. If I wasn't partisan, if no one was partisan, it would be cool to see Brandon Johnson win, because in the beginning of this race, I could go back to polling, but I don't feel like it, he was not even in the running. He was, polling at 5-8%. He was not a serious contender. So it would be cool to see him win. But looking at Paul Vallas' support all throughout this race, and the fact that he scored 10 points higher than Brandon, more than 10 points higher than Brandon Johnson in the first round of voting, I think that Paul Vallas will take the win, especially with Lori Lightfoot's unpopularity. So my final prediction, I do have Paul Vallas winning this race. I believe that Paul Vallas will become the next mayor of Chicago. Thank you all for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you all next time. Thanks again.